You got the right one, baby. This is 33.5B, and this is Mr. K's. How you doing? We've been looking at the Cold War, and after Stalin dies, we've got guys like Khrushchev and Brezhnev that follow along the party line at times, and at times they don't. We see U.S. presidents during that time that face some challenges, like the Cuban Missile Crisis with Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson with Vietnam. We're going to continue on today. I can get this going. Hello. There we go. Luckily, or fortunately, there's a term called détente. It's a French word meaning a lessening of tension. It's a policy of lessening Cold War tensions. It's a policy of lessening Cold War tensions. T-E-N-S-I-O-N-S. Inconceivable, but we've got a U.S. president who comes on the scene. His name is Richard Nixon, U.S. president, and he does the inconceivable in 1972. He visits the PRC, that's People's Republic of China, and the USSR, both in the same year, in 1972. What's he talking about? Well, with the Chinese, he's talking about some similarities. Well, ping pong is one. And with the Soviets, he's talking about similarities like ballet and ice hockey. This is called ping pong diplomacy. As he's meeting with the Chinese, he also talks about the similarity that they have between their dislike of the Soviet Union. If the Soviets ever get too big for their britches, maybe we can gang up on them and knock them down. Then he goes over to the Soviet Union and he talks about the same thing. We have a common enemy, and that's the communist Chinese. If they get too big for their britches, maybe we can join together and knock them down. That's called playing the Russia card or the China card. And when you remember like guys like Forrest Gump who go over there and play ping pong, it's to open up channels of agreement. Hey, if we can agree on ping pong or ice hockey, maybe we can agree on coexistence. Well, this détente leads to what we call the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks. That's SALT. It's a treaty, Strategic Arms Limitation Talks. We're talking about nuclear weapons, obviously. The U.S. and the USSR agree to limit the number of nukes. They agree to limit the number of nukes. It's to lessen the chance of nuclear war. If you don't have as many nukes, there's less likely nuclear war. Also, in the 1970s, we see meeting at Helsinki, the capital of Finland, all these nations, including the U.S. and the USSR, U.S. and USSR, plus 33 other nations agree to commitment to détente, D-E-T-E-N-T-E, and cooperation, the Helsinki Accords. That's a historic thing. Talks about human rights and commitment to détente and cooperation. Now, down the way, we also have a SALT II agreement that talks about the limiting of nuclear launchers. In 1979, it was negotiated by the U.S. and the USSR. It was signed but never ratified by the Senate due to the USSR invasion of Afghanistan. Due to the USSR invasion of Afghanistan, A-F-G-H-A-N-I-S-T-A-N. We agreed to it, but we did not sign it and put it into law because we did not like what the Soviets do with invading Afghanistan. I want to show you a couple pictures here. During 1972, Richard Nixon flies to China and meets with Premier Zhou Enlai, but also the old great helmsman, Mao Zedong. He was very elderly, and his health was failing, but they met and they talked. Later on, he meets with Leonid Brezhnev. That guy, I'm not lying, he has one eyebrow. Leonid Brezhnev. And they talked about their common agreements as well as their differences. It was a historic year for the United States as well as the world in 1972. Unthinkable. A president going to visit commie nations. Oh my goodness. Okay. Later on, we have Ronald Reagan, who's a U.S. president. He moves away from détente. He moves away from détente. Now, why is this? Well, because of the invasion of Afghanistan and the Soviets trying to push their might around with free nations. He increased defense spending to pressure the USSR. He increased defense spending to pressure the USSR. It was a great time to join the Army. You got better pay, you got better opportunities, but it was a time where Reagan is talking tougher and he's moving away from Détente. 1983, we have what's called the Strategic Defense Initiative. Strategic Defense Initiative. They nicknamed it the Star Wars system because back in 1976, the first Star Wars film was shown. And it's the idea that there's a system to shoot down ICBMs from space. ICBMs from space. Those are nuclear rockets from space. We talked like we had it. Did we? Well, we don't know. Maybe the government had it, maybe they didn't have laser cannons in outer space. But the idea was it made the Soviet Union back off. And then finally, during Reagan's presidency, we have the Nicaraguans facing civil war. It increased superpower tensions. This is not a nice time as far as easing of tensions. Reagan stood up to the Soviets in a tough way, and it cost, I guess, a lessening of tensions is what I wanted to say. Well, this is Mr. K's. We're ending the chapter of Chapter 33. This is 33.5b, and I will see you down the way. Bye-bye.